The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the small neighborhood park. Kids were laughing, parents were chatting, and the sound of a basketball bouncing echoed in the distance. Among all the noise and activity, there was one boy who stood out. He was about 10 years old, with messy hair and clothes that looked a little too big for him. He sat alone on a bench, watching the other kids play with their parents. His eyes lingered on a father and son tossing a football back and forth. The boy's face was calm, but if you looked closely, you could see a hint of sadness in his eyes. The boy stood up suddenly, as if he had made up his mind about something. He walked over to an empty spot near the swings and started pretending to throw an imaginary ball. He would toss it high into the air, run to catch it, and then cheer for himself as if someone was watching. To anyone passing by, it might have looked strange, but the boy didn't care. He was lost in his own world, a world where he had a dad who played with him, who cheered for him, who was proud of him. A man sitting on a nearby bench noticed the boy. He was in his late 30s, wearing a simple jacket and jeans. He had come to the park to clear his head after a long day at work. At first, he thought the boy was just playing a game, but something about the way the boy kept looking over at the other families made him curious. The man watched for a few minutes, his heart growing heavier with each passing moment. There was something about the boy's loneliness that struck a chord deep within him. Finally, the man stood up and walked over to the boy. "Hey there," he said gently, not wanting to startle him. The boy froze for a second, then turned around slowly. His eyes were wide, as if he wasn't used to strangers talking to him. "What are you playing?" the man asked, trying to sound casual. The boy hesitated, then shrugged. "Just throwing a ball," he mumbled, looking down at his feet. "Mind if I join you?" the man asked with a small smile. The boy looked up, surprised. No one had ever asked to join him before. He nodded shyly, and the man pretended to catch the imaginary ball the boy threw. They played like that for a while, the boy's face lighting up with each throw and catch. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't alone. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the man sat down on the grass, and the boy sat beside him. "You're pretty good at this," the man said, trying to keep the conversation light. The boy smiled but didn't say anything. There was a silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people are just enjoying each other's company. After a few minutes, the man decided to ask the question that had been on his mind. "Do you come here often?" he asked, looking at the boy. The boy nodded. "Yeah, I like it here. It's quiet." The man noticed the way the boy hesitated before saying the last word, as if he wasn't sure how to describe why he liked the park. "Do you come with your family?" the man asked carefully, not wanting to push too hard. The boy's face fell, and he looked down at the grass. "I don't have a family," he said quietly. The man's heart sank. He had suspected as much, but hearing it out loud made it feel more real. "I live in a foster home," the boy continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't really have anyone to play with, so I come here and pretend." He shrugged, as if it was no big deal, but the man could see the pain in his eyes. The man didn't know what to say. He had always considered himself a kind person, but he had never been in a situation like this before. He wanted to help, but he didn't know how. "What's your name?" he asked finally, trying to keep the conversation going. The boy looked up at him, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. I'm just a kid," he said, avoiding the question. The man nodded, understanding that the boy wasn't ready to share too much. "Well, just a kid, it's nice to meet you," the man said with a smile. "I'm just a guy who likes to play catch." The boy smiled back, and for a moment, the weight of his loneliness seemed to lift. They sat there for a while longer, talking about nothing in particular. The man told the boy about his job, and the boy talked about his favorite things at the park. It was a simple conversation, but it meant the world to the boy. As the sky grew darker, the man realized it was getting late. "I should probably head home," he said, standing up. The boy's face fell, but he nodded. "Thanks for playing with me," he said quietly. The man hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. He wrote down his phone number and handed it to the boy. "If you ever want to play catch again, just give me a call, okay?" he said. The boy took the paper and held it tightly, as if it was the most precious thing in the world. The man walked away, his heart heavy but hopeful. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew he had made a difference in that boy's life, even if it was just for a little while. As he left the park, he couldn't help but wonder about the boy's story. What had happened to his family? Why was he in foster care? And most importantly, what could he do to help? The boy watched the man leave, clutching the piece of paper in his hand. For the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. He looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the sky and smiled. Tomorrow was a new day, and for once, he was looking forward to it. The next day, the boy woke up early, his mind still replaying the events of the previous evening. He had slept with the piece of paper clutched in his hand, as if letting go of it would make the memory of the kind stranger disappear. The foster home was quiet, the other kids still asleep. He tiptoed to the small shared bathroom, washed his face, and put on the same oversized clothes he had worn the day before. His foster parents were kind but busy, always juggling work and the needs of the other children. They didn't have much time to spare for him, and he had learned not to ask for too much. As he ate a quick breakfast of cereal, he thought about the park. He wondered if the man would be there again. He didn't even know his name, but he had called him just a guy, and that felt enough for now. The boy finished his food, slipped the piece of paper into his pocket, and quietly left the house. The park wasn't far, just a short walk down the street. The morning air was cool, and the streets were still quiet. He liked this time of day, it felt like the world belonged to him alone. When he reached the park, he saw that it was mostly empty. A few joggers were making their way around the path, and an older man was walking his dog. The boy walked over to the same spot near the swings where he had played with the man the day before. He stood there for a moment, looking around, half expecting the man to appear out of nowhere. But there was no sign of him. The boy sighed and sat down on the grass, pulling his knees up to his chest. He waited for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. The sun rose higher in the sky, and the park began to fill with more people. Families arrived, kids started playing on the playground, and the noise level grew. The boy watched it all from his spot, feeling more alone than ever. Maybe the man had just been being nice yesterday. Maybe he didn't really mean it when he said they could play catch again. The boy's heart sank as he thought about it. He had let himself hope, and now that hope was slipping away. Just as he was about to get up and leave, he heard a voice behind him. "Hey, just a kid." The boy turned around, and there he was, the man from yesterday. He was wearing a different jacket, but he had the same kind smile on his face. The boy's heart leaped, and he quickly stood up, trying to hide how relieved he was. "You came back," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course I did," the man replied. "I said I would, didn't I?" He held up a small bag. "I even brought a real ball this time. No more pretending." The boy's eyes lit up as the man pulled a bright red rubber ball out of the bag. It wasn't anything fancy, but to the boy, it was perfect. The man tossed it to him, and the boy caught it easily. They started playing catch, just like they had the day before, but this time it felt different. This time, it was real. As they played, the man asked the boy more questions, careful not to push too hard. He learned that the boy had been in foster care for a few years, moving from one home to another. He didn't talk much about his past, and the man didn't press him. Instead, they talked about simpler things, favorite foods, favorite games, favorite places in the park. The boy opened up more than he had the day before, and the man could see the walls around him slowly starting to come down. After a while, they took a break and sat on the grass. The man handed the boy a bottle of water, and they drank in silence for a few moments. Then the man said, "You know, you're a really good kid. You've got a lot of courage." The boy looked at him, surprised. "Courage? Why?" "Because," the man said, "it takes a lot of strength to keep going when things are tough. And you're doing it. You're here, you're playing, you're smiling. That's not easy." The boy didn't know what to say. No one had ever told him he was brave before. He looked down at the grass, feeling a lump form in his throat. He didn't want to cry, not in front of the man, but the words had touched something deep inside him. The man noticed the boy's reaction and quickly changed the subject. "So, what do you want to be when you grow up?" he asked. The boy thought for a moment. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe a teacher. Or a firefighter. Or, maybe someone who helps kids like me." The man smiled. "Those are all great choices. You could be anything you want to be." The boy looked up at him, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and doubt. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," the man said firmly. "You've got a good heart, and that's the most important thing. The rest will come." They sat there for a while longer, talking and laughing. The boy felt a warmth in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just the man's kindness, it was the feeling of being seen, of being valued. For the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel invisible. As the morning turned into afternoon, the man checked his watch and sighed. "I should probably get going," he said. "But I'll be back tomorrow, okay? Same time, same place." The boy nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. He didn't want the man to leave, but he also didn't want to seem too needy. "Okay," he said quietly. The man stood up and ruffled the boy's hair. "Take care of yourself, just a kid. And remember, you're not alone." The boy watched as the man walked away, the red ball still in his hands. He held it tightly, as if it was a lifeline. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had something to look forward to. The man had given him more than just a ball, he had given him hope. As he walked back to the foster home, the boy couldn't stop thinking about the man's words. "You're not alone." He repeated them to himself over and over, as if saying them out loud would make them more real. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. Maybe he didn't have to be lonely anymore. When he got home, he hid the ball under his bed, along with the piece of paper with the man's phone number. He didn't want anyone to take them away from him. They were his treasures, his reminders that someone out there cared. That night, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about the next day. He wondered what they would talk about, what games they would play. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of a future where he wasn't just a lonely foster kid, he was someone who mattered. The next morning, the boy woke up with a sense of excitement he hadn't felt in years. The sun was barely up, but he was already dressed and ready to go. He quietly slipped out of the house, making sure not to wake the other kids. The streets were still quiet, the air crisp and cool. He walked quickly to the park, his heart pounding with anticipation. Would the man be there again? Or had yesterday just been a one-time thing? When he reached the park, he saw the man sitting on the same bench as the day before, sipping from a coffee cup. The boy's heart leaped, and he ran over, trying to act casual but failing miserably. The man looked up and smiled when he saw him. "Morning, just a kid," he said. "You're up early." The boy shrugged, trying to hide his excitement. "Couldn't sleep," he said, which wasn't entirely a lie. He had been too excited to sleep much. The man chuckled. Well, I'm glad you're here. I brought something for you. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small, wrapped package. The boy's eyes widened as he took it. He carefully unwrapped it, revealing a brand new baseball glove. It was brown and slightly worn, as if it had been used before, but to the boy, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. This is for me?" he asked, his voice trembling. The man nodded. "I thought it might come in handy. You can't play catch properly without a glove, right?" The boy didn't know what to say. He had never owned anything like this before. He slipped the glove onto his hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes shining with gratitude. The man smiled. "You're welcome. Now, let's see how good you are with that thing." They spent the next hour playing catch, the boy getting used to the feel of the glove. At first, he fumbled a few times, but soon he was catching the ball with ease. The man cheered him on, making him feel like a star. For the first time in his life, the boy felt like he was good at something. As they played, the man asked the boy more about his life. He learned that the boy had been in foster care since he was 6, after his parents had passed away in a car accident. He didn't remember much about them, just fragments, a lullaby his mother used to sing, the smell of his father's cologne. The boy spoke quietly, his voice tinged with sadness, but he didn't cry. He had learned to hold his emotions in, to keep them locked away where no one could see. The man listened carefully, his heart breaking for the boy. He couldn't imagine what it must be like to grow up without a family, to feel so alone in the world. He wanted to help, but he didn't know how. All he could do was be there, to offer what little comfort he could. After a while, they took a break and sat on the grass. The boy was quiet, lost in thought. The man could tell he was thinking about his parents, so he decided to change the subject. "You know," he said, "I used to play baseball when I was your age. I wasn't very good, but I loved it." The boy looked up, curious. "Really? What position did you play?" "Shortstop," the man said. "I wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but I had a good arm. My coach used to say I had a cannon for an arm." He laughed at the memory. The boy smiled. "That's cool. I want to play on a team someday." "You should," the man said. "You've got a natural talent. With a little practice, you could be really good." The boy's smile widened. No one had ever told him he had talent before. He felt a spark of pride, something he hadn't felt in a long time. As the morning wore on, the man told the boy more stories from his childhood, funny moments, embarrassing moments, moments of triumph. The boy listened intently, hanging on every word. He loved hearing about the man's life, about the adventures he had had and the lessons he had learned. It made him feel like he was part of something bigger, like he wasn't just a lonely foster kid. Eventually, the man checked his watch and sighed. "I should probably get going," he said. "But I'll be back tomorrow, okay?" The boy nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. He didn't want the man to leave, but he also didn't want to seem too clingy. "Okay," he said quietly. The man stood up and ruffled the boy's hair. "Take care of yourself, just a kid. And remember, you're not alone." The boy watched as the man walked away, the new glove still on his hand. He held it tightly, as if it was a lifeline. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had something to look forward to. The man had given him more than just a glove, he had given him hope. As he walked back to the foster home, the boy couldn't stop thinking about the man's words. "You're not alone." He repeated them to himself over and over, as if saying them out loud would make them more real. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. Maybe he didn't have to be lonely anymore. When he got home, he hid the glove under his bed, along with the ball and the piece of paper with the man's phone number. He didn't want anyone to take them away from him. They were his treasures, his reminders that someone out there cared. That night, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about the next day. He wondered what they would talk about, what games they would play. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of a future where he wasn't just a lonely foster kid, he was someone who mattered. The days began to blur together in the best possible way for the boy. Every morning, he would wake up early, slip out of the foster home, and head to the park. And every morning, the man would be there waiting for him, always with a smile and something new to share, a story, a snack, or sometimes just a quiet moment of companionship. The boy had started to look forward to these mornings more than anything else in his life. For the first time in years, he felt like he had something to live for. One morning, as they sat on the grass after playing catch, the man turned to the boy with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking. You're really good at this. Have you ever thought about joining a little league team or something?" The boy looked down at his glove, running his fingers over the worn leather. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I don't think I'd be any good on a real team." The man raised an eyebrow. "Are you kidding? You've got a natural talent. With a little practice, you could be one of the best players out there." The boy shrugged, but the man's words lingered in his mind. He had never thought of himself as talented before. To him, playing catch was just something fun to do, a way to pass the time. But the man made it sound like it could be more than that, like it could be a way to belong. "I don't even know how to join a team," the boy admitted after a moment. The man smiled. "Well, lucky for you, I happen to know a guy who coaches a local little league team. I could talk to him if you want." The boy's eyes widened. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course," the man said. "But only if you're interested. No pressure." The boy thought about it for a moment. The idea of being on a team, of having teammates and a coach, was both exciting and terrifying. What if he wasn't good enough? What if the other kids didn't like him? But then he looked at the man's encouraging smile and felt a spark of courage. "Okay," he said. "I'll try it." The man's smile widened. "That's the spirit. I'll talk to the coach and let you know what he says." The boy nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had never been part of anything like this before. The closest he had come was watching other kids play sports from the sidelines, always feeling like an outsider. But now, for the first time, he felt like he might actually belong. The next morning, the man had news. "I talked to the coach," he said as soon as the boy arrived at the park. "He said you can come to practice this weekend and see how it goes." The boy's heart raced. "Really? What do I have to do?" "Just show up and do your best," the man said. "The coach is a good guy. He'll help you figure things out." The boy nodded, trying to calm his nerves. "What if I mess up?" The man put a hand on his shoulder. "Everyone messes up. That's how you learn. The important thing is to keep trying." The boy took a deep breath and nodded again. He trusted the man, and if the man believed in him, maybe he could believe in himself too. That weekend, the boy went to his first little league practice. The man came with him, staying on the sidelines to offer encouragement. The coach was friendly and welcoming, introducing the boy to the other kids and explaining the basics of the game. At first, the boy felt out of place, unsure of what to do or where to stand. But as the practice went on, he started to relax. He wasn't the best player on the field, but he wasn't the worst either. And when he made his first catch during a drill, the other kids cheered, making him feel like he was part of the team. After practice, the coach came over to talk to him. "You did great out there," he said. "You've got a lot of potential. Keep practicing, and you'll be a star in no time." The boy beamed, feeling a sense of pride he had never felt before. "Thank you," he said. The man walked over, clapping him on the back. "See? I told you you'd do great. The boy smiled, his heart full. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. He had a team, a coach, and a friend who believed in him. It was more than he had ever dared to hope for. As they walked home, the boy couldn't stop talking about practice, the drills they had done, the kids he had met, the plays they had run. The man listened with a smile, happy to see the boy so excited. When they reached the foster home, the boy turned to the man. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." The man ruffled his hair. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad to see you happy." The boy nodded, but he knew he would never be able to fully express how much the man's kindness meant to him. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had a future, like he wasn't just a lonely foster kid, he was someone who mattered. That night, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about the next practice. He couldn't wait to get back on the field, to keep improving, to keep proving himself. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of a future where he wasn't just a player on a team, he was a star. The boy's life began to change in ways he had never imagined. Joining the Little League team gave him a sense of purpose and belonging that he had never experienced before. The other kids on the team were friendly, and the coach was patient and encouraging. The boy still had moments of self-doubt, but every time he made a good play or received a word of praise, his confidence grew a little more. He was no longer just the lonely foster kid who sat on the sidelines, he was part of a team, and that meant everything to him. The man continued to come to the park every morning, and their routine remained the same. They would play catch, talk, and sometimes just sit in comfortable silence. But there was a new energy between them now. A shared excitement about the boy's progress on the team. The man became his unofficial coach, giving him tips on how to improve his throws and catches. He even brought a bat one day and taught the boy how to hit. The boy wasn't great at it at first, but he was determined to get better. One morning, as they practiced hitting, the man noticed the boy was quieter than usual. He wasn't laughing as much, and his swings were less enthusiastic. The man stopped the practice and sat down on the grass, patting the spot next to him. The boy sat down, staring at the ground. "What's on your mind?" the man asked gently. The boy hesitated, then sighed. "I don't know if I'm good enough for the team," he admitted. "The other kids are so much better than me. What if I mess up during a game and let everyone down?" The man nodded, understanding. "It's normal to feel that way," he said. "But you're not giving yourself enough credit. You've come a long way in a short time. The other kids have been playing for years, and you're already keeping up with them. That's something to be proud of." The boy looked up, his eyes filled with doubt. "But what if I'm not good enough?" The man put a hand on his shoulder. "Being good enough isn't about being perfect. It's about trying your best and not giving up. And that's something you're really good at." The boy thought about that for a moment. He had never thought of himself as someone who didn't give up. He had always just kept going because he didn't know what else to do. But maybe that was a kind of strength. "You know," the man continued, "when I was your age, I was scared of failing too. I thought if I wasn't the best, then I wasn't good enough. But I learned that it's not about being the best, it's about being your best. And that's something no one can take away from you." The boy nodded slowly, letting the man's words sink in. He still felt nervous, but he also felt a little stronger, a little braver. "Thanks," he said quietly. The man smiled. "Anytime. Now, let's get back to practicing. You've got a game coming up, and I want to see you hit a home run." The boy laughed, the tension easing from his shoulders. They spent the rest of the morning practicing, the boy's swings growing more confident with each try. By the time they were done, he was smiling again, his doubts pushed to the back of his mind. The day of the first game arrived, and the boy was a bundle of nerves. He woke up early, his stomach churning with anxiety. He put on his uniform, which the coach had given him, and looked at himself in the mirror. He barely recognized the boy staring back at him. He looked like a real player, someone who belonged on a team. But he still didn't feel like one. The man met him at the park and walked with him to the field. "You're going to do great," he said as they approached the bleachers. "Just remember what we practiced, and don't forget to have fun." The boy nodded, but his hands were shaking. The man noticed and knelt down to his level. "Hey," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You've worked hard for this. You've earned your spot on this team. No matter what happens out there, I'm proud of you." The boy took a deep breath and nodded again. "Okay," he said, his voice steadying. The game started, and the boy's nerves slowly faded as he got into the rhythm of the game. He didn't make any big plays, but he didn't make any big mistakes either. He caught a few balls, made a couple of good throws, and even got a hit when it was his turn at bat. The other kids cheered him on, and the coach gave him a thumbs up from the sidelines. When the game ended, the boys' team had lost, but he didn't feel defeated. He had played his best, and that was enough. As he walked off the field, the man was waiting for him with a big smile. "You were amazing out there," he said. "I told you you could do it." The boy grinned, his heart swelling with pride. "Thanks," he said. "I couldn't have done it without you." The man shook his head. "This was all you. I just gave you a little push." As they walked home, the boy felt a sense of accomplishment he had never felt before. He had faced his fears and come out stronger on the other side. He knew there would be more games, more challenges, but he also knew he could handle them. He wasn't just a lonely foster kid anymore, he was a player, a teammate, someone who mattered. That night, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about the game. He replayed every moment in his mind, savoring the feeling of being part of something bigger than himself. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of the next game and the next victory. The boy's confidence grew with each passing week. He attended every practice, worked hard, and slowly but surely became a valued member of the team. The other kids started to see him not just as the new kid, but as a teammate who could be relied on. He wasn't the star player, but he was consistent, and that mattered. The coach often praised his determination, and the boy soaked up every word of encouragement. The man continued to be a constant presence in his life. He came to every game, cheering loudly from the stands, and still met the boy at the park in the mornings. Their bond deepened, and the boy began to see the man as more than just a friend. He was like the father he had always wished for. The man never pushed for anything more, never tried to replace what the boy had lost, but his steady presence filled a void the boy hadn't even realized was there. One morning, as they sat on the grass after a practice session, the boy turned to the man with a question that had been on his mind for a while. "Why do you do all this?" he asked. "Why do you spend so much time with me?" The man looked surprised, then thoughtful. He took a moment before answering. "I guess because I see a lot of myself in you," he said. "When I was younger, I didn't have it easy either. I had people who helped me along the way, and I guess I just want to pay that forward." The boy nodded, but he still looked curious. "Did you have someone like you? Someone who helped you?" The man smiled. "I did. His name was Mr. Thompson. He was my neighbor, and he used to take me to the park, just like I do with you. He taught me how to play baseball, how to ride a bike, and most importantly, he taught me that I mattered. He showed me that even when things are tough, there's always hope." The boy's eyes widened. "What happened to him?" The man's smile softened. "He passed away a few years ago. But I'll never forget what he did for me. He changed my life, and I guess I'm trying to do the same for you." The boy looked down at his glove, running his fingers over the worn leather. "You are," he said quietly. "You've changed my life too." The man reached over and ruffled the boy's hair. You're a good kid. You've got a big heart, and I know you're going to do great things." The boy smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "What happens when I have to leave?" he asked. "I mean, I'm in foster care. I could get moved to another home anytime." The man's expression grew serious. "That's true," he said. "But no matter where you go, you'll always have what we've built here. You'll always have the skills you've learned, the confidence you've gained, and the knowledge that you're not alone. And if you ever need me, I'll be here." The boy nodded, but the thought of leaving still weighed heavily on him. He had finally found a place where he felt like he belonged, and the idea of losing it was terrifying. A few weeks later, the boy's worst fear came true. His foster parents sat him down one evening and told him they had to move to another state for work. They couldn't take him with them, so he would be placed in a new foster home. The boy's heart sank, but he tried to stay strong. He had learned to face challenges head-on, and he wasn't going to let this break him. The next morning, he went to the park to tell the man the news. The man listened quietly, his face filled with concern. When the boy finished, the man put a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know this is hard." The boy nodded, fighting back tears. "I don't want to leave," he said. "I don't want to lose everything I've worked for." The man looked at him, his eyes filled with determination. "You're not going to lose everything," he said. "You're taking it with you. The skills you've learned, the confidence you've gained, that's all yours. No one can take that away from you." The boy took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "But what about the team? And you?" The man smiled. "The team will miss you, but they'll understand. And as for me, I'm not going anywhere. You can call me anytime, and if you're not too far, maybe I can come visit." The boy nodded, but the thought of leaving still felt like a heavy weight on his chest. He didn't want to say goodbye, but he knew he didn't have a choice. The day before he was set to move, the team held a small farewell gathering for him. The coach gave a speech about how much the boy had grown, and the other kids presented him with a signed baseball. The boy was overwhelmed by their kindness, and for the first time, he realized how much he had come to mean to them. That evening, the man came to the foster home to say goodbye. He handed the boy a small package wrapped in brown paper. The boy opened it to find a framed photo of the two of them at the park, playing catch. Underneath the photo were the words, "You're not alone." The boy looked up, his eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." The man pulled him into a hug. "You're going to be okay," he said. "You're stronger than you think." The boy nodded, holding on to the man tightly. He didn't want to let go, but he knew he had to. When they finally pulled apart, the man handed him a piece of paper with his phone number. "Call me anytime," he said. "I mean it." The boy took the paper and held it tightly. "I will," he promised. As he lay in bed that night, the boy thought about everything he had gained, the friendships, the skills, the confidence. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew he wasn't alone. He had the man's words, his encouragement, and the knowledge that he mattered. The next morning, as he packed his few belongings, the boy felt a sense of hope. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he had the strength to face it. He wasn't just a lonely foster kid anymore, he was someone who mattered, someone who had made a difference. As he left the foster home, he took one last look at the park in the distance. He knew he would miss it, but he also knew it would always be a part of him. He had found hope there, and no matter where he went, he would carry that hope with him. The boy's new foster home was in a small town a few hours away. It was quieter than the city he had come from, with wide-open fields and a slower pace of life. The family he was placed with seemed kind, but they were older and kept to themselves. They didn't have any other children, and the house felt too big, too empty. The boy missed the noise and chaos of his old foster home, the camaraderie of his teammates, and most of all, he missed the man. The first few days were hard. The boy felt like a stranger in a strange place, unsure of where he fit in. He kept the framed photo the man had given him on the nightstand by his bed, and every night before he went to sleep, he would look at it and remind himself of the man's words, "You're not alone." One evening, after dinner, the boy mustered up the courage to ask his new foster parents if he could join a local sports team. They seemed surprised but agreed to look into it. The next day, they found a little league team in the nearby town and signed him up. The boy felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was his chance to start over, to find a new sense of belonging. The first practice was nerve-wracking. The boy walked onto the field, his glove in hand, and felt like the new kid all over again. The coach introduced him to the team, and the other kids nodded politely, but no one went out of their way to talk to him. The boy tried to push aside his disappointment and focus on the game. He knew he had to prove himself, just like he had done before. As the practice went on, the boy's skills began to shine. He made a few good catches and even hit a solid line drive during batting practice. The coach noticed and gave him a nod of approval. By the end of the session, a few of the kids started to warm up to him, asking where he had learned to play. The boy told them about his old team and the man who had taught him so much. They seemed impressed, and for the first time since moving, the boy felt like he might actually fit in. That night, he called the man. He hadn't spoken to him since leaving, and he was nervous about how the conversation would go. But as soon as he heard the man's voice, all his worries melted away. "Hey, just a kid," the man said, his tone warm and familiar. "How's it going?" The boy smiled, clutching the phone tightly. "It's going okay," he said. "I joined a new team today." "That's great," the man said. "How was it?" The boy told him about the practice, about the kids, and about how much he missed their mornings at the park. The man listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and advice. By the end of the call, the boy felt like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He wasn't alone. The man was still there, still rooting for him. Over the next few weeks, the boy settled into his new routine. He went to school, attended practices, and slowly started to make friends. He still missed his old life, but he was beginning to see that he could build something new here too. He called the man regularly, updating him on his progress and sharing his struggles. The man always knew what to say to make him feel better, and the boy was grateful for his unwavering support. One Saturday, the boy's new team had their first game. He was nervous but excited. He had been practicing hard and was determined to make a good impression. As he stepped onto the field, he thought about the man's words, "You're not alone." He took a deep breath and focused on the game. The boy played well, making a few key plays that helped his team secure a win. After the game, the coach praised him in front of the team, and the other kids clapped him on the back. The boy felt a surge of pride. He had done it. He had proven himself again. That evening, he called the man to tell him about the game. The man listened with pride, his voice filled with genuine happiness. "I knew you could do it," he said. "You're unstoppable." The boy smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. The man chuckled. "You give me too much credit. This is all you." As the weeks turned into months, the boy continued to thrive. He became a key player on the team, made friends at school, and even started to feel at home with his new foster family. He still missed the man and their mornings at the park, but he knew he was building a life for himself, one step at a time. One day, the boy received a letter in the mail. It was from the man. He opened it eagerly, his heart racing with excitement. Inside was a short note and a photo of the two of them at the park, playing catch. The note read, "Just a kid. I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished. You've come so far, and I know you're going to do amazing things. Remember, no matter where life takes you, you're not alone. I'm always here, cheering you on. Your friend. Just a guy. The boy held the letter tightly, tears welling up in his eyes. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he had the strength to face it. He had the man's words, his encouragement, and the knowledge that he mattered. That night, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about how far he had come. He wasn't just a lonely foster kid anymore, he was a player, a teammate, a friend. He had faced challenges and overcome them, and he knew he could do it again. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of the future and all the possibilities it held. The boy's life continued to change in ways he could never have imagined. He had settled into his new town, made friends, and even started to feel like he belonged. But deep down, he still carried the lessons and memories of the man who had changed his life. The framed photo and the letter were his most treasured possessions, reminders that he was never truly alone. One sunny afternoon, as the boy was walking home from practice, he noticed a flyer pinned to the community bulletin board outside the town's grocery store. It was an announcement for a regional Little League tournament. Teams from all over the area would be competing, and the boy's team had been invited to participate. His heart raced as he read the details. This was a big deal, a chance to prove himself on a larger stage. He ran home, bursting with excitement, and showed the flyer to his foster parents. They smiled and agreed to let him go, even offering to drive him to the tournament. The boy couldn't wait to tell the man. That evening, he called him, his voice filled with excitement. A tournament, the man said, sounding just as thrilled as the boy. That's amazing. You're going to do great. I hope so, the boy said. But I'm kind of nervous. What if I mess up? You're not going to mess up, the man said firmly. You've worked too hard for that. Just go out there, do your best, and have fun. That's all that matters. The boy nodded, even though the man couldn't see him. I'll try, he said. You'll do more than try, the man said. You'll succeed. I believe in you. The boy smiled, feeling a surge of confidence. The man's words always had a way of calming his nerves and lifting his spirits. The day of the tournament arrived, and the boys' team gathered at the field. The atmosphere was electric, with teams and spectators filling the stands. The boy felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as he warmed up with his teammates. He scanned the crowd, half hoping to see the man, but he knew it was unlikely. The man lived hours away, and the boy hadn't told him the exact location of the tournament. Still, he couldn't help but wish he was there. The first game was intense. The boys' team was up against a strong opponent, and the score remained tied until the final inning. With 2 outs and the bases loaded, the boy stepped up to bat. His heart pounded as he gripped the bat, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He took a deep breath and remembered the man's words, "Do your best and have fun." The first pitch came in fast, but the boy held his swing. "Strike 1," the umpire called. The second pitch was a curveball, and the boy swung but missed. "Strike 2." The boy's hands were sweaty, and his legs felt like jelly. He glanced at the stands, and for a split second, he thought he saw the man's face in the crowd. He blinked, and the image was gone, but it gave him the boost he needed. The third pitch came in, and the boy swung with all his might. The crack of the bat echoed through the field as the ball soared into the outfield. The boy dropped the bat and ran, his heart racing as he rounded the bases. By the time he reached home plate, the crowd was on its feet, cheering. He had hit a grand slam, securing the win for his team. The boy's teammates mobbed him, slapping him on the back and shouting his name. He felt a rush of pride and joy unlike anything he had ever experienced. As he caught his breath, he scanned the crowd again, hoping to see the man. But there was no sign of him. The rest of the tournament went by in a blur. The boys' team made it to the finals, and though they didn't win the championship, they played their hearts out. The boy was proud of what they had accomplished, and he knew he had given it his all. As the team packed up to leave, the boy's foster parents approached him with smiles on their faces. "We're so proud of you," they said. "You were amazing out there." The boy thanked them, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't shake the feeling that the man had been there, watching him. He knew it was probably just his imagination, but it had felt so real. When they got home, the boy went straight to his room and called the man. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, just a kid," the man said. "How'd it go?" The boy told him everything, the Grand Slam, the finals, the way the crowd had cheered. The man listened with pride, his voice filled with genuine happiness. "I knew you could do it," he said. "You're unstoppable." The boy smiled, but there was something he had to ask. "Were you there?" he said. "At the tournament?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No," the man said. "I couldn't make it. But I was there in spirit, cheering you on." The boy nodded, feeling a mix of disappointment and gratitude. "I thought I saw you," he said. "In the crowd." The man chuckled. "Maybe you did. Maybe I was there in your heart, where it matters most." The boy smiled, his eyes filling with tears. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." "You don't have to thank me," the man said. "You did this. You're the one who put in the work, who never gave up. I'm just proud to know you." The boy hung up the phone and sat on his bed, holding the framed photo the man had given him. He thought about how far he had come, from the lonely boy at the park to the confident player he was now. He knew he still had challenges ahead, but he also knew he had the strength to face them. That night, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about the future. He wasn't just a lonely foster kid anymore, he was a player, a teammate, a friend. He had faced challenges and overcome them, and he knew he could do it again. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of the future and all the possibilities it held. And in his heart, he carried the man's words, a reminder that he was never alone.